Welcome back, everybody, to the Even Your Dynasty show.
We just got breaking news in.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Even Your Dynasty show. We've got a special guest today. Matthew Knauer is going to join us. He's going to bring some really cool, different insights, especially regarding the pitching. We're going to do a lot of talking on them, and I'm sure we'll talk about some other stuff. So if you guys end up having questions for Matthew, make sure you guys are throwing them in the chat. We'll flag some of those so we can ask them to him as we kind of go. But hey, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to talk some ball tonight. And yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. So, anytime I get to bring a guest on here that's got like a wealth of knowledge, and it's funny because you're pretty young too, and you've got a lot of insight on a lot of this stuff. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a freshman. You can actually see me right now in my college dorm down at UCLA. I'm studying business, econ, and data science, and that sort of is what I'm interested in doing. I've always loved numbers and statistics and math, and I've played baseball my whole life and been a Giants fan my whole life. So it's cool being able to connect those two things. And the awesome thing about baseball is there's so much publicly available data. So I love just like spending hours going down rabbit holes, finding cool information, and then writing about it. So I was the editor in chief for my high school paper. And so I sort of have that writing background, and now I'm writing for the Daily Bruin down here at UCLA. So yeah, love baseball, love talking ball, and a bunch of different interests sort of meshed.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for those of you that don't know, and we'll make sure we add it into the description later if we need to, and you can kind of share your, where they can follow you on X. But Matthew puts out a lot of really great threads where he'll, it'll be however many posts, and it's got a lot of details on like what pitchers have been doing, what like has helped them succeed, where they might need to work on. You do it with position players too a lot. I see it kind of for all sorts of players. So if you guys don't follow them already, make sure you check them out there.
Yeah, thank you.
So, all right. So we're going to kind of just jump right into it. So obviously the Giants have had we can call it a disappointing offseason. We can call it whatever we want. Haven't had a lot of action here so far, but they have added a couple pitchers, a couple starters with Adrian Hauser, Tyler Mahle, a couple relievers, some that are questionable on, how available they're going to be throughout the year. But, what have your thoughts been so far on the guys they've added? Has any of them like really stand out? Any of them you didn't really kind of understand the thought process there? What are your overarching thoughts there?
Yeah, so I'll start. I mean, first of all, you get frustrated. You see other teams signing players, and the Giants are signing the Tyler Mahle and Adrian Hausers of the world, which we'll get into a second. And it gets frustrating, but I also like to hold off on making judgments before the offseason is over. Buster Posey traded for Rafael Devers in the past. I think he signed Willie Adames last offseason. He's shown that he has the ability to make moves, and so I'm still having some patience there. But as for the moves they've already made, Tyler Mahle is the first guy I'll talk about, which I really like this signing. The quote that I keep sort of repeating is, if he was the second best arm you got behind a Tetsuya Imai or a Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez, I would have been ecstatic.
Yeah.
As the headliner, tied sort of with Adrian Hauser, I'm more middling. Last year, he had a great year in Texas. The ERA was in the low twos, but he missed a fair amount of the season with some shoulder issues. So the first thing you're worried about is he going to be healthy coming into 2026? And it seems like that was sort of a theme for this Giants offseason, is picking up some guys who have injury concerns in the past. So it's going to be a test for the strength staff, the conditioning staff, and keeping them healthy. So that's the number one thing with Mahle. The other thing is, I think there's some pretty easy areas for growth here. And the first thing that I look at is the way that he uses his pitches, in that his splitter's in the strike zone more often than his fastball. So he really tries to pinpoint his fastball above the strike zone, and the strike rate's down right around 60%, which is really low. And his splitter strike rate is up above 70%. So ideally, the first shift that I'd love them to make is try and get his fastball in the strike zone more and use the splitter as like a 2-strike swing and miss weapon and use it below the strike zone because it's a really good pitch. And Mahle has really good command, but he's just a little bit too precise with the fastball. And I think they can also get a better slider out of the profile. That's something that I could talk a while on and ramble about is, spin and spin axis and shape optimization. But the Giants hired a few, what seems like really smart pitching minds. Christian Wonders, especially from the Rays, seems to stand out. So, that'll be a fun test to see what he can do with Mahle's slider. But overall, it should be a pretty safe bet. You hope for 100-plus innings with some decent production. And what this contract and the Hauser contract does is it doesn't tie you into, giving rotation spots. There's still plenty of opportunity for the Birdsongs and the Tidwells and the Kaiwei Tangs and the Trevor McDonalds of the world to come in and pitch a ton of innings. As for Hauser, it's a little bit more of a safe bet. The way I like to describe the profile is I'm going to throw this sinker right over the plate and you can hit it, and then we'll mix in, a changeup and a slider and a curveball that are all okay. It's a really good sinker, and he gets a lot of ground balls with it, but using it around half the time, he's not going to get a ton of strikeouts. So it's a safe, consistent profile. He'll throw a fair amount of innings, hopefully make 25, 30 starts. But that profile probably doesn't have the same upside that Mahle may have.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Hauser, and he's been a pretty safe bet to get you, 100 to 140 innings most years. So, I mean, like you said, you at least feel like he's going to be on the mound for the most part. And I totally agree on Mahle as far as I thought he made more sense than Hauser as far as like an upside number 5, where if he's on the field, you might get really good production. He might kind of outperform being a 5-starter, but it's a big question on if he won't, if he'll be healthy or not. So,
yeah. And the other one that stands out from the reliever side is Sam Henches, another one with, injury question marks. But if you can get a fully healthy season from him, this was one of the best left-handed relievers in baseball from 2022 to 2024. That's a legit high leverage arm who I'd be, completely comfortable with in the 7th and 8th inning. But, that still puts Ryan Walker in the closer role. I would have loved for them to get one more high leverage arm behind that.
Yeah.
They took some flyers on some other guys. Jason Foley is an exciting arm. Another one with health issues. So we'll see what comes about with that. I still think, there are plenty of non-roster invitees, minor league signings that I think they'll go after, maybe take a few flyers on some guys. But, as for now, the bullpen seems like it's somewhat solidified and it's decent. There's a lot of options, but they're going to need a few guys to step up. Hopefully Henches, Foley, and some of the guys in-house can do that.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think they need at least one more. It's funny because a lot of people ask like, who's going to be setup guy? Who's going to? I looked at how Cleveland used Henches a couple years ago, and if he can get back to being that guy, obviously he hasn't pitched in a year or so. He certainly could handle, I think, the 8th. I agree with you there. That might be your setup guy.
And you have, in baseball, it's not as analytics have evolved, it's not as regimented. Like this guy goes the 8th inning, this guy goes the 7th inning. But if you have 2 lefties coming up anywhere late game, that's a perfect lane for Henches. And he's this funky reliever, really big with 2 really good breaking balls. Left-handed hitters just struggle with it. And he can get righties out too. But especially if you have a few lefties coming up, like Henches will mow them down. And especially when you're facing the Dodgers, they just got Kyle Tucker too. Yeah. Tucker, Ohtani, and some of their other left-handed hitters, he'll have to plow through that middle of the order.
Yeah, if you think about it, the Giants actually are one of the few teams that might be decently equipped for that part of the order against the Dodgers in the
Eric
later
Miller
innings.
Too.
Because I was just going to say, you got Eric Miller and Henches. So you got some guys that you can put up against Ohtani. Obviously, Miller kind of famously had that. What was it like? Ohtani went 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts or something like that against him one year. So,
and that's, I guess we already brought him up, so we'll talk about him a little bit more. Eric Miller's a guy who I think has the chance to, be just as good as Hench's as a high leverage back end arm. 2025 was brutal for him. He was hurt, suffered a few different injuries. And that took him out for a lot of the season, but you could also tell that affected his performance when he was on the field. The command was really iffy, but in 2024, he was a really, really powerful left-handed reliever. I mean, throwing 100 from the left side, the sinker is incredible. I really want him to start throwing that more because the four-seam shape isn't all that good. And then it's just a devastating slider profile and a really nice changeup too. If he's in the strike zone enough and stays healthy, he has the makings to be, one of the best high leverage lefties in baseball.
Yeah, and that seems to always be the question for Miller. Can he get in the strike zone? Because he's a guy that he doesn't necessarily have to be exact with his control.
Exactly.
It just needs to be in the zone, and a lot of times guys are gonna have a really hard
and
time with
it doesn't even have to be all that much. In 2024, the walk rate was like 15%, and he was still effective.
Yeah, for sure. And now, like, we'll continue on the theme of the pen for right now. We'll probably circle back to the rotation here shortly, but any of the young guys in, whether that's AAA, some of them have debuted in the majors. Obviously, we're going to be without Randy this year. But, you have guys like Peguero. He's actually not that young, but you have Peguero who debuted. There's a few other guys like Trent Harris, Braxton Roxby they acquired prior to last season in the Taylor Rogers deal. I know another name that a lot of people kind of wrote off, but it kind of one of those that if he can just get in the zone, Will Bednar has some pretty nasty stuff. Is there anybody that really stands out to you that you think maybe can go compete and take a job? I know we've got Santos and Killian they brought in on non-roster invites, but like, is there any of those other young guys that you feel like might take that jump?
Yeah, I mean, Bednar is the one that you brought up, and I wrote about him, was talking about him a fair amount earlier this offseason because he was in a lot of Rule 5 discussions, and the stuff is incredible. It's the same thing as Eric Miller that we just talked about is like, can he be in the strike zone enough? The walk rate was up above like 16% for a good amount of last year, but if you look from July onwards, it was down near 10%, and that's all it has to be with, a fastball that at times averages 99 miles an hour with really, really good carry and pretty devastating breaking ball off of it. Same thing with Miller. All you need to be is over the plate and the stuff is going to play. So I think he has a really good shot to contribute in the back end of the Giants bullpen. Peguero is the same sort of situation too. Throws really hard, average over 100 on the four seam with a really good slider. Same thing. Is he going to be in the strike zone enough? The difference between him and Bednar is Bednar gets really, really good carry on his fastball. So it plays even, above what the, traditional velocity would say, whereas Peguero's fastball shape isn't as ideal. But both of those guys are really, really high stuff arms who have a good shot. Two other guys I'll mention who have pitched a fair amount in the big leagues in the last 2 years, so I think have a good shot to contribute in the bullpen. Carson Seymour and Keaton Wynn, guys who probably the next tier up in command above Peguero and Bednar. They've had their own issues with command, but it's not nearly as bad. Carson Seymour has really good stuff. He averaged around 96, 97 with his fastball, and he throws 3 fastballs, a four seam, a sinker, and a cutter. And then his slider, which is he calls it a death ball. And it's sort of one of the new fads in the analytical movement is this really, really hard breaking ball that still gets a ton of depth. And hitters just really, really struggled with it. I think he needs to throw it more. He needs to be a little bit more in the zone with his fastball. But in a 1-inning role, I think Carson Seymour could be really good. And then Keaton Wynn, the other guy I mentioned, has, we've seen it for years. The splitter's legit, and he throws pretty hard too. Originally I thought he would have been a really nice option as a starter, but there's so many other guys who seem ahead of him in line. And, the throws hard with a really good splitter is a profile for success out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I do think Keaton Wynn's a guy that I've definitely been more on the feeling like he needs to be in the pen because it just feels like he never really developed that third pitch. So he'd always look really good one time through the order. And then when the guys got to face him a second time, it was like, okay, because he didn't really have the third pitch to go to.
And he's flashed a slider that's been interesting, but it's not super consistent. So that'll be an important thing for him.
And we're gonna get to definitely some of the other young guys, but like Wisenhunt's another guy that I almost feel kind of similarly, where that changeup in a 1 inning roll could be really just
I
tough
made
on hitters.
the same comment earlier this offseason. Unfortunately, like all progress on a breaking ball has just been completely obsolete. It's and the fastball profile is not very good either. So it's, the changeup is one of the best pitches in baseball, but without any help, there's not much you can do as a starting pitcher. So I agree. I think Wisenhunt, hopefully, if the velocity can tick up a little bit in the bullpen and then just ride the changeup, might be a nice lefty reliever. Especially, we've seen this offseason how much of a premium left-handed relief pitching costs. The Mariners gave up a top 100 prospect for Jose Ferrer. The Brewers gave up a haul for Angel Zerpa, two really solid lefty relievers. If the Giants could turn Wisenhunt into a nice lefty reliever, I'd be ecstatic.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely would recover a good amount of his value. I mean, he's probably lost a little bit of the shine, and maybe there's other teams. I know supposedly the Giant. I know Robert Murray and Passan floated something, but I know supposedly the Giants are interested in some trade talks. Maybe one of those teams likes Wisenhunt, but it certainly seems like he's lost at least some of that prospect shine and that value over the last 2 years. With him out of the, if he goes to the pen, and my question is going to be more on his fastball. Like, what do you think it's strictly a velo thing? Do you think it's a shape? Is it a combination? I know some of it was control, because
it's a combination of multiple factors. So he throws from a really high arm angle, and so even though he averages about 17 inches of induced vertical break on his fastball, which is pretty decent, except for when you account for the fact that he's throwing from right over the top. And so it just comes out as a really flat pitch in right around 92 miles an hour. And hitters have just at AAA and in the big leagues have hit it really hard. He also doesn't throw it for strikes enough. And so that's the big thing. Like, if he's in the bullpen and hopefully it ticks up to, 93, 94 instead of 92, and he just gets it in the strike zone enough, you can throw your changeup 50% of the time. That'll do plenty. So, a lot of issues can be masked if hitters are not having to see you a third time or even a second time through the order.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even in a 1 inning roll, or especially in a 1 inning roll, that would probably, you can certainly, you see that with a lot of guys where they'll throw their breaking balls that are relievers, 30, 40, 50% of the time in those kind of rolls. So, okay, for sure. And then before I go to the other starters, earlier you kind of mentioned the Christian Wonder, and I know there was a nugget that came out recently that he's out working with Birdsong right now in Scottsdale already.
I did not see that. That makes me very, very excited.
Oh, yeah. It was on, Kyle Haynes mentioned it. It was on the Splash Hit territory. The Susan and FP were interviewing Haynes.
Yeah, I saw clips from that podcast. I'll go.
Okay. So he mentioned Eldridge is out there working on defense. He said, Ramos is out there working on defense. And then he said Birdsong's already there. And he said Frank Anderson came prior to the holidays, worked with him a little bit. And then Christian Wonder, I guess, lives in that area. So he's been coming out and working with Birdsong.
So that gets me really excited. I mentioned in my Birdsong article, I sort of outlined what my plan would be if I was working with Birdsong on how we can sort of get him back to the 2024 levels and beyond of success. And the first thing I noticed was that he's just way too precise with his fastball. And he does not need to be aiming for the corners of the strike zone with the stuff that he has. And it leads to a lot of misses off the plate. But the second thing is he also still has a lot of big misses where it's like, he's aiming for the outer half of the zone and he misses up and in. And a lot of that is just like strictly mechanics and strike throwing ability. And Christian Wonders in his LinkedIn bio says like biomechanical guru or something along the lines of that. And he's known for at the Rays and at Cressy Sports Performance before being just a master in pitching mechanics and how the body moves. And I think there are definitely some things in the delivery that he'll be able to tweak. So that has me really excited. The other thing with Birdsong that, really hurt him in 2025 is he lost his slider. It was in 2024, just a pure bullet slider with a ton of depth. And it was just incredible. The whiff rates were almost near 50%. And in 2025, it turned into a cutter. it was added like 7 inches of induced vertical break, and the whiff rate fell to like 20%. And so, if you have a slider that gets swing and miss half the time, that'll mask some of your walk concerns because hitters just can't hit you. So that's definitely part of it, but it all starts with just being in the strike zone enough. And yeah, hopefully Christian Wonders can work some magic.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'm going to ask you also about Justin Massage. Like, what do you think of this coaching staff they brought in? And I know I've noticed a little bit of movement in the minor leagues. We're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole where they're starting to announce some of those coaching staffs. Funny enough, they still haven't announced the Giants coaching staff, but
which they said during winter meetings, like basically it was going to come out in the next few days, and still no word.
Yeah, I think the only like nugget we've really gotten recently is that Washington's going to end up coaching third, which I think most of us were hoping / expecting that. But so what are your thoughts overall on this coaching staff? Obviously, they got a couple guys that have a good amount of experience in the major leagues with Massage and Wonders as assistants. And, Massage was doing like the minor league pitching development in Pittsburgh, and they've churned out some really good arms over the years. And then also bringing Frank Anderson up from Tennessee, who, obviously hasn't been in the majors, but he's got a wealth of experience developing young pitchers. What do you think of the coaching staff hires they made there, and kind of the direction you expect the club to go, if it's maybe leaning in harder on developing the young starters, or, what do you kind of think of this?
Yeah, I think something that's really important when you build out a coaching staff and just an organization in general is like having a diversity of thought and, people from different backgrounds who have different ways of maybe thinking about baseball. And especially when you have Tony Vitello, who's never, managed in the big leagues before, getting a few guys with a lot of big league experience around him is paramount. Like that is awesome to have Ron Washington and Bruce Bochy and Jace Tingler surrounding him, but then also having some really smart-minded guys. Hunter Mentz came from the Toronto Blue Jays. Mekich came from the Pirates and the Brewers. And I think it's important, when you're bringing in coaches, bringing them from organizations that have consistently been at the forefront of, player development. So the Brewers, pitching-wise, have been one of the best player development teams, and Mekich was there last year. Christian Wonders was with the Rays, who are right up there as well. And Hunter Mentz was coaching last year for the Blue Jays on an offense that, had a historic turnaround. So it's I'm really, really excited to see what they've done with the new coaching staff, and we'll see. I mean, hopefully it'll lead to some big jumps this coming season.
Yeah, and I mean there is reason to believe that they can squeeze more out of the existing group on this team. I mean, aside from the fact that I think most of us felt like they got about as little as possible out of it last season, a lot of the young, especially you look at the lineup, and as of today, obviously things can change, but as of today, 2/3 of the lineup are guys that are between 21 and 27. And then there's a whole list of young starters that we've kind of touched on there a little bit, but
yeah. And I think just having new voices and a new perspective come in and give you some tips, whether, it's pitchers or hitters, is huge. If you've been hearing the same sort of ideas from the hitting coaches and pitching coaches for the last 2 or 3 years. Oh, I'm sorry. My lights turned down here. There we go. It gets a little bit redundant and repetitive. And so sometimes all it takes is a fresh face and a new, sort of cue or new adjustment. And that's, can turn a player around.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. So we're going to jump right back to the starters. Also, everybody, if you got questions for Matthew, make sure you throw them in the chat. I'm going to kind of
feel free. I already
mention that.
Seen a few. We can get to them.
Yeah, I flagged a couple in there. We'll get to the prospect talk here probably very soon. We're kind of talking about guys that are prospects still, but I think the last couple guys that we'll talk about this group of starters that probably are almost guaranteed to get, not any individual, but like that you're probably going to need 20 to 30 starts out of these guys. When you look at the current rotation, barring some kind of surprise on the team out of nowhere, grabbing Freddie Peralta or something like that, which supposedly they're still in on, but with this group that's coming, the Wisenhunt, Tidwells, the Birdsongs, McDonald, I guess we could say Tang, Seymour, there's a whole bunch of these arms. Who do you kind of have the most confidence in? Like, what do you think of these guys coming up?
Yeah, I'd say right now it's a pretty tight one. I'd say my number one is definitely Blade Tidwell. It's a profile that it's ready to be a big league pitcher. He has two really good breaking balls, in a sweeper and a tighter slider, and that's a recipe for success against right-handed hitters. As a right-handed pitcher, if you can throw two, distinct different breaking balls that both have success, you're gonna do well. Now, the thing for him is, can he solve lefties? He's added a curveball and he's thrown a changeup and cutter that have had a lot of success in the past. And so I think, it's a pretty well-rounded profile. He throws a lot of strikes, really good off speed. So I'm really high on Blade Tidwell. I put out an article on him a few days ago. It was unfortunate. He suffered a shoulder injury at the end of last year and wasn't able to debut. But what he did in 3 appearances in Sacramento was incredible. And it's sort of a testament to, the Giants. They made a few smart changes with his arsenal. Well, his breaking balls are his 2 best pitches, so why not throw them more often? And I think the other pitch that's really important for him is the sinker, because the 4-seam shape is pretty average. But being able to have a second shape versus right-handed hitters, he throws hard, throws 96 miles an hour. So having a second sort of separate shape is really valuable. And then the other one, Trevor McDonald, is probably a pretty close second for me. It's interesting. He flashed like a totally different breaking ball in his short stint in the big leagues, and the curveball just completely annihilated hitters. It had a 60% chase rate in 3 games, which is just out of this world good. But he threw it a lot harder and it was a lot tighter. And so I'm excited to see. It's almost the Landon Roop approach where he can throw the curveball 40+% of the time as long as he can command it decent enough, which he's done. And the sinker is a pretty decent pitch as well. So the Giants seem to like these low slot right-handed pitchers who have really good sinkers. Logan Webb, Landon Roop, Trevor McDonald. I think McDonald's another great option. The changeup is going to need to improve a little bit versus lefties, but I think it's also a pretty consistent floor. And then Birdsong is the other one who you hope can make a huge jump this year and improve the command. We talked about it a fair amount, but I'd say those are my top 3 right there.
Okay. Any of them do you feel would be better suited out of the pen right now that you just think would have a ton more success?
I mean, I think Birdsong would be just disgusting out of the bullpen, but I think it's probably too soon to make that transition. And then I'll briefly talk about, I like Kai Wei Tang a lot as well, but he's probably the one who I'd say is best suited for the pen. A few reasons. I mean, first of all, it just seems like there are a few guys ahead of him in line. But it's also one of those profiles that he has multiple really, really good breaking balls. And in a 1-inning role, that just works incredibly. The fastball is pretty average or even below average. And so when you have to see hitters 2 or 3 times, they start to punish that. But if you can keep the fastball usage low in just a 1-inning stint, I think he can have a ton of success. So, yeah, Kai Wei Tang to the bullpen might be a really good move. But he also showed some decent success last year in throwing in length.
Yeah. It's funny because with McDonald, I always felt like that curveball and the breaking balls that he had would be just disgusting out of the pen, because he can still hump it up into the mid to upper 90s at times. So I always felt like he'd be really good in that kind of role. But then you see the sinker ball and you can see how he can be really efficient with his pitches at time. And you go, okay, I can see how this guy could be a really good starter, or at least a very consistent back end starter. If kind of like Roop, like you mentioned. And it's hard because I feel like Tidwell and Birdsong have the highest ceilings as starters, but at the same time, I feel like they also might be your best options as potential leverage relievers on this team right now.
And that's a difficult question you have to answer as an organization, but I think, you have to give them as long as of a chance as you can in the rotation, because, the value of those guys as a starting pitcher, if they can throw enough strikes and pitch in bulk, is just incredible.
Yeah, long-term value, it is definitely way better in the rotation, even if it's not necessarily what the team needs today, although I still argue they do, obviously. But that's the hard part, especially when Birdsong's 24. I think Tidwell just turned 25, or he's going to turn 25 next season. I'm checking my notes here. So it's a really tough spot to be in for the org there, but it does sound like they're going to have a lot of arms, a lot of options. I don't really want to see them do the thing they did with Birdsong last year, where they put him in the pen and then try and jump him back into the rotation midseason.
Yeah.
I hated that. I don't want to see any of the starters really do that. I don't mind if they start in the rotation and then in sack, and then you got to put them in the pen later. I can live with that. I just don't like the try and build their arms up mid-season stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
And I think giving them all those young guys a chance to work it out and compete in AAA as starting pitchers is, probably the best plan for success. And that builds internal competition between them. We're fighting for who's going to pitch best in Sacramento and get the call to San Francisco. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what they do. But Sacramento looks like it'll have a really, really exciting pitching staff.
yeah, anybody listening, if you go to Sacramento this season, it's just kind of like San Jose last year. There's odds are you're going to get a really good, starter at least in that game. So definitely worth checking them out. Kind of on the topic of the young guys, Tom asks, where do you see Roop's further development aside from just staying healthy?
Yeah, for me, I mean, the primary thing is fastball velocity. Fell from 94 plus in 2024 to right around 93 or even below it for a lot of 2025, and that's a big jump, especially for a guy who the sinker profile it has a lot of run to it. But if it's at 92, it's a pretty hittable pitch. If it's at 94, it's an above average pitch, and guys are hitting it into the ground. So that's an important thing, and hopefully Mekich and Wonders and the rest of the pitching development squad can do that, because Roop has shown better velocity a lot throughout his career. So that's a big thing. And then really just refining the changeup and cutter to left-handed hitters, because he'll plow down righties with the sinker and the curveball. I mean, to righties, he goes 40+% usage curveball and just spams the pitch, and it works really well. To lefties, it's a good pitch, but it's not as effective. And so really just refining the cutter and the changeup as sort of additional offerings, so he's not totally reliant on the curveball. That's probably the key for him, and staying healthy, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, there was a stretch there last season for what, a month, 2 months almost, that he was like a top 3 pitcher in baseball for a long.
I'm really excited to see what he can do in a full season here.
Yeah, just hopefully he can stay on the field. And I'll come to his defense. That last injury was kind of a freak thing, so wasn't another arm issue or elbow or anything like that. He got hit in the knee. It's is what it is. But all right, so we'll jump over to the prospects, unless there's we can always circle back to the big league team here if there's any of the hitters or anything like that. We'll kind of finish on that probably, but we're going to jump over to the prospects for a few minutes here. First, before I get down the rabbit hole on the pitchers down there, Willem asked, are you higher on Joshua or Luis? And obviously this is extremely early on both of them.
Yeah, I mean, we have basically no public information on Luis Hernandez besides, a small sample when he played in the Venezuelan Winter League, which is very impressive at his age, at 16 years old, to be doing and competing against, grown men. But Josuar did it in the Dominican Summer League and really, really impressed. The underlying data, the power was very solid, flashed defensively, stole a bunch of bases, made a ton of contact. So Josuar, what he did as a 17-year-old, just looked like such a well-rounded player. Definitely going to be, as of now, higher on Josuar. That's no slight to Luis Hernandez. He just hasn't played professionally. But I'm super excited to see where they start Luis Hernandez this year. There's been some talk about it on Twitter. Josuar will likely be stateside in the Arizona Complex League, and that seems like it'd be the right fit for Luis Hernandez, given that he's already played against grown men in Venezuela, and the Dominican Summer League will probably be too easy for him. But then that would mean you have 2 shortstops playing in Arizona. So I wonder what they're going to do there. It looks like Johnny Level will be starting at shortstop for San Jose. So, to me, Arizona might be a really exciting team with both Josuar and Luis, if that's how they decide to roll them out. Whatever they do, there's probably going to have to be some flipping and flopping. But, yeah, as for now, I'm higher on Josuar, but both are, stellar prospects.
Yeah, and they're just obviously they're different profiles. You look at a guy like Gonzalez, and he's very twitchy, pretty high end speed. You're looking at a guy that at his peak might be just an elite table setter, Gold Glove shortstop type. I mean, that's kind of how they're talking about him right now. I think they gave him a 70 grade on defense in Baseball America's recent. Like, of all these shortstops, because they're obviously stockpiling him right now. It seems like he's if he makes it, he's going to be the shortstop. It's almost how I'm interpreting a lot of what I've heard on these guys. But I mean, Luis, obviously it's a different profile. I mean, they're talking about his body still filling out. He could end up being a pretty potent middle of the order guy. So I guess it's just all in the eye of the beholder, at that point. I think they're probably have similar ceilings, but just different profiles.
Yeah, totally different profiles, and still a long way to go. These kids are, would be in high school if they were growing up in America, and it's crazy to think like younger than me.
Yeah. And it's funny because I keep getting people coming at me on X right now where they're like, why are you excited about a guy that's not going to help for 5 years? I'm like, guys, you got to accumulate assets. There's nothing bad about getting high-end prospects.
Yeah.
You might trade them. I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure we all want to see him help the Giants, but that's the best way to get your team back is to have a big, strong farm system. So, and then, okay, so let's jump in on some of the younger arms. Obviously, you kind of told me in the green room, you do follow a lot of the minor leagues. You have your opinions on there. Are there any arms that really stand out to you? Because especially in San Jose, and you'll probably see some of these guys in Eugene, guys like Bresnahan, but especially down there, you had a bunch of guys move from Arizona to San Jose. By the end of the year last year, I mean, you had the Bresnahans, the Keener Martinez, Argenis Kayama, the Luis De La Torre. I mean, you name it. They had a bunch of guys that were just dealing down there. Does anybody stand out to you a lot? And you can even expand that up to,
Yeah, I mean, Luis De La Torre stands out a ton. It's a really impressive arsenal. He throws his fastball from a really low release height while still getting a ton of carry. And so it's just this weird angle that hitters really struggled with. And he had like a 35% strikeout rate last year. So I'm excited to see. He was held back a little bit, like just a slower developing guy, played in the DSL at 20 years old. So the process, was a little bit behind for him. But hopefully if he has success, starting in Eugene and throughout, we could see him in the upper levels of the minors this year. But the whole group is strong. I mean, Bresnahan was really, really impressive in San Jose. For him, it's, okay, can he add a little bit of velocity and just continue to refine the breaking ball and the changeup? But he's just a really solid pitcher. It's three pitches, a lot of strikes, decent velocity. So yeah, Bresnahan's really exciting. And then the two younger guys you just mentioned, Argenis Kayama and Keener Martinez. Kayama's a really exciting one for me because he's really young. And I know some people were mentioning struggled a little bit in San Jose, but the kid was 18 years old. He just turned 19.
He was gassed
a few months ago. So just dominated the Arizona Complex League. I'm really excited to see what he can do. A more under the radar name that I really like, and it actually answers the question. The Collector asked, what's your favorite single pitch in the Giants minor league system? And this is totally niche, but I'm going to go with Jeremy Maldonado's slider. Unfortunately, there's no publicly available data on it, but some of the stuff that I've heard is just incredible, and you can see it in the strikeout rates. For him, it's a matter of, like we talked about with a lot of other guys, injuries and command issues. But if he can stay healthy and be in the strike zone enough, this is a really, really high-powered arm. And I wonder if it's more likely that they'll speed run him through the bullpen. But Jeremy Maldonado's slider is really impressive. It's 85 or so miles an hour with 15+ inches of horizontal break, which you do not see very often. So yeah.
And oh, by the way, everybody, he throws 100 miles an hour too. Yep. So, and his fastball is pretty gross from what I've seen. So, no, I agree. I feel like I watched him last year and they kept having him start games, but then he would only go 2 innings. And obviously he was coming off, I think he came off Tommy John.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
They were really limiting him. And I just kind of wonder, it's kind of like the same talk they had with Reggie Crawford, who obviously he's having all sorts of setbacks and stuff, unfortunately, but where they were trying, they kept talking about, I want to develop this guy as a starter. And sometimes I just kind of wonder, hey, at what point do you just say you're a reliever and you have a chance to be a really dominant one?
Yeah.
And you just go with that. So,
yep. And I'll mention 2 other names down pretty low. So Carlos De La Rosa was part of the Camilo Doval return, and he just turned 18. This kid is incredibly young, but he really impressed in the Dominican Summer League. I had a guy I know in baseball who said basically if he was in last year's draft, he would have been a top 10 pick as a lefty. This is an 18-year-old in the mid 90s, 93, 94 with his fastball. And it's, a frame that can definitely add a lot to it. So, you don't see that kind of velocity from a young lefty. And I've heard the breaking ball and changeup are pretty awesome too. And, you can look at the statistics last year, 30+% strikeout rate with really good command in the Dominican Summer League. So I'm excited to see what he does this year. If it's maybe sort of the Kayama, Keener Martinez, Luis De La Torre type of dominance at Arizona, and maybe we even get to see him in San Jose. And then the one other name I'll bring up really quickly is Josh Bostic, who struggled a lot early last year, but had a great second half. The velocity increased, the slider got a lot better, and he's not too far off now. Like, he's pitching in Richmond. If he has success there, then he's one step away from the big leagues. It's not a guy who has gotten, a ton of public fanfare, but the stuff is really impressive, and it's another one of those profiles that just like solid. He throws a lot of strikes, decent velocity, a few good off speeds, and the changeup was a big improvement, I guess, in the second half last year that the Giants were really emphasizing. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do as well.
Yeah, I really liked what Bostic showed, especially in the second half last season. And he had his moments early in the year, but second half he was throwing really well. I actually went to a couple of their playoff games they were in Everett in that Northwest League Championship. And I heard a couple of the Everett guys coming up to him, including I think Ty Pete, who's pretty highly up the Mariners system.
Yeah.
And I heard a couple of those guys coming and talking to Bostic, and they're like, and they straight up told him in Game 4, they're like, "Yeah, we just need a win today because none of us want to face you tomorrow." It was pretty interesting. So
yeah, I mean, he had he had a 12 strikeout game and a 14 strikeout game in the second half last year. The ERA was like well below 2. It was really impressive what he did.
Yeah, it seems something really clicked for him. And he's got that big breaking ball. I think you said it classifies as a slider. It almost, when you're watching it, it almost looks like a big curveball, but he throws it.
It's like a two plane shape, so it gets really good depth. It's supposedly around -5 horizontal and vertical break. So that's a big breaking ball that he throws pretty hard. And then, like I said, like in the second half, apparently he really refined the changeup shape, and that got really good swing and miss too. So yeah, it's an exciting profile, and like we talked about, just really impressive in the second half, and hopefully he can continue to keep up those changes.
Nice. All right, I'm going to pull George's question up here really quick. We've got a couple. He said, "Do either of you see Bresnahan coming up in 2027?" Well, okay, this is going to be assuming there's a season in 2027.
Yeah,
but we're not going to go too deep on that. I'll start. I don't personally think it'll be 2027. I would say better chance in 28. But if he comes out and dominates in Eugene, maybe he gets a promotion pretty early on. Obviously, they had him stick around in San Jose all year last year, which that's been kind of not uncommon, especially with younger guys. They like to let them marinate in the level all year for early on, and then they might be a little more aggressive later.
Yeah, and he's still 20 years old. He's a young kid who didn't play college baseball. So yeah, the Giants like to see them have success for a full season at a level. And I don't think there's really any need to rush him right now. They have a lot of talent in the upper minor leagues who you'd probably prefer, being your major league depth. So, if all things go right, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him, maybe second half 2027, but I think the timeline's probably more likely in sometime in 2028.
Yeah. All right. And then we're going to do a little bit of draft talk here. George also asked, I'm going to defer 100% to Matthew on this. I don't know how deep you go down on draft prospects. I will be the first to admit I don't pay too close of attention until usually as we get a little closer, because obviously they have basically their whole college seasons ahead for most of these guys. And you never know who's going to really rise up boards, fall off boards. You just never know. So I'll defer to you on that one. But they said, who do you think Giants will draft in 26? Really like Drew Burrs. Nice.
Yeah, it's tough. So much can change from January to June. And there are so many guys who, maybe they have okay freshman and sophomore years, but take a huge leap in their junior year and now are at the top of the class. But I'll give a few names that I really like. He mentioned Drew Burress from Georgia Tech, really athletic outfielder with a ton of power, could be a great fit. Justin LeBron his name made some headways just because, obviously it will with that last name, but just a really well-rounded shortstop from Alabama. Derek Curiel is an outfielder from LSU who has really impressive bat to ball and sort of fits the Buster Posey sort of mold that we've been seeing them sort of prioritize the last few years. There's some really impressive college arms. Cam Fluke at Coastal Carolina. We saw him in the College World Series last year, pitch really, really well. Liam Peterson from Florida. And then there's a bunch of high school guys, which are even more difficult to project because who knows what's going to happen there. But, there are a ton of different options. I'm excited this spring. I'm going to be covering Rock Chalowski at UCLA for the Daily Bruin. Unfortunately, it looks like it's pretty likely he'll go 1-1. But if by some miracle he falls to the fourth spot, I'd love that in San Francisco. There are a ton of different options right now, and I'm excited. We're going to get the whole spring to watch these guys play, and we haven't really gotten to say that. The Giants haven't picked at the top of the draft like this since Joey Bart, and so it'll be fun sort of watching the scene both in college and high school the whole spring and seeing who stands out.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, you never know. Ethan Holiday was basically talked about as a lock 1-1 pick for 2 years, and then he ended up going fourth to the Rockies.
And that's the thing that's
never know.
Fluctuates so much with the baseball draft is it's all about the signing bonus. And if the number one team can't pay what Ethan Holiday's asking, then the Angels will draft Tyler Bremner $2 million under slot because they want to save a little bit of cash. So that plays a huge factor into it.
Did I lose you?
No, you got me?
Okay, yeah, you're good. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I thought you were still going. And
no worries, no worries.
Okay. It'll be really interesting. And it's funny. I don't, my personal opinion, I don't foresee them going with a high school guy. I don't want to say, I don't think they're going to be patient enough for that, but I do think they're going to take this opportunity to try and grab a guy that they think actually can move pretty fast.
Well, and especially when you have this big league talent that you've paid a fair amount of money for, you've set this window as your time for success. So hopefully, like you said, you can get an impact college guy who, with the way players are moving up through the minor league system right now, in a year and a half can contribute at the big league level.
Yeah, that'd be pretty ideal if they can get someone that 2028 is got a shot. So it'll be really interesting. Something a lot to watch as the season goes. We'll see how the board looks. I mean, I would love to see them go get a pitcher that we feel like has kind of ace potential, but also like just best player available.
Yeah, I'll give one more name. So Bay Area kid Jackson Flora at UC Santa Barbara is in that sort of class, top 10, top 15 right now. I actually faced him when I was in high school. He's up to, triple digits with his fastball as a right-handed starter. So that's another guy that could be really intriguing.
All right. Lee says Jensen, Hirschkorn. Do you know anything about him?
I do not. But I'm sure in the next, few months, he'll come across my radar.
Yeah, that's like I said, Lee, I definitely am the last person to ask about draft stuff 4 months in it, or what are we, 6 months out? That's not my that's not my forte. As I get closer, that's when I start paying a lot more attention. But before I jump back, we're gonna be wrapping this up, guys, in probably about 10 minutes, just so you guys know. So definitely get your whatever questions you might have in there. But any other prospects in the system, not necessarily starters, or not necessarily pitchers, I should say, but any other prospects that really stand out to you that you're really high on?
Yeah. Let me think of which name I want to shout out right now. I mean, a basic one, but I'm going to go Dakota Jordan. He just has all the tools in the world. The bat speed is up there with like MLB level power hitters, like 76 plus miles an hour, which is just unprecedented. Yeah. Really strong kid who plays an impressive outfield. For him, it's, he was playing competition younger than him in San Jose. And injuries sort of kept, I'm sure we would have seen a promotion if he played the full season in San Jose. But injuries sort of derailed last season. So I'm excited to see what he can do a full year in Eugene. But with that kind of power, if he can get the ball in the air just a little bit more, we might see a pretty rapid ascension through the minors. Another name, so Kyle Haynes shouted him out. Actually, one of the clips I did see from the Foul Territory podcast was Kyle Haynes shouted out Victor Barracoto, and he's a name that's totally flown under the radar. But he's only 24 years old and had a really good season in Richmond last year. The unfortunate thing about Richmond is it's just such a pitcher-friendly league that overall numbers look pretty get totally deflated. But Barracoda had a 130 WRC plus in Richmond last year, which means he was essentially 30% better than the average hitter. And when he got to Sacramento, the production fell a bit, but he was hitting the ball really hard, a hard hit rate near 50%, and an average exit velocity well over 90 miles per hour. So I'm excited to see what he can do last year, especially seems like the organization is pretty high on him. And, I'd love if we could find external help in the outfield, but Barracoda might be a depth option, who can fill in if needed if he performs at Sacramento.
Yeah, for sure. To what you're saying about Dakota, I do think if he has a good half season or so in Eugene early in the year, I think he'll actually start really getting kind of more respect in those whatever publisher, insert publisher here, in their rankings and things like that. I think he'll start getting more national attention because I do think it's the being in a, we'll call it younger competition or lesser, whatever you want to call it. What stood out to me with him was the fact that he went from college to the pros and his whiff rate and strikeout rate and everything dropped, which is not something you see all that often. So that I was pretty excited to see, but I just think it's strictly the level he was at.
Yeah. The thing with him is, so for a guy with that much bat speed, swing and miss has never actually been the huge issue. It's the plate discipline where sometimes he'll expand with two strikes and chase a little bit too much. So really, if he can dial in, the strike zone and his control of the plate, that becomes a really, really intriguing profile. And then two other guys I'll mention. The first one is, was a first round pick last year, but I still think he's being underrated. Gavin Keelan, like this kid tore up the SEC last year, and whatever, he struggled in 10 games at San Jose. That doesn't really affect how I, judge him as a prospect. I'm so excited to see what he does in a full season. It's just, a really well-rounded, like solid ball player. He doesn't strike out a ton. He has good plate discipline and walks a lot with pretty decent power too. So I'm excited to see. Probably he'll start the year at San Jose, but we might see a promotion if he can have success. And then the last guy I'll mention, who I've tweeted about a ton, one of my favorite prospects in the org, is Parks Harbor. Another part of the return for Camilo Doval, which that trade just gets better by the day. He hits the ball incredibly hard. He was probably the best hitter in the Arizona Fall League, which has some of baseball's best prospects. And he'll start the year in Richmond, but I'm interested to see what happens there because he was probably facing better prospects, better pitching in Arizona than he will in Richmond. So I think we might see a pretty rapid ascension there as well.
Yeah, and even if he does, because I'll use Ceballos as an example. He was a guy I was super excited to see in Richmond last year, and then obviously he had one of the worst starts to the year in the entire org. He finished like fantastic, and I think he had like a 140 WRC plus his last 2 months. But even if Harbor struggles a little bit, he's a guy I feel pretty confident will figure it out there, even if there are early struggles. And then to your point earlier, you were talking about how hard it is to hit in Richmond. And I think a lot of Giants fans kind of underrate like just how difficult it is to hit there. Because I had somebody the other day talking about Bo Davidson, and he was like, well, his numbers in Richmond didn't stand out because I think he hit 234 or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm
the
like,
OPS was barely above 700.
Yeah,
but
and he was a 110 WRC plus.
Yeah,
It's like, he's still better than average there.
Yeah.
So
sometimes it's like, I don't know, it's almost, if you see, an extended period of success at that level, might be worth it for the Giants to then promote to AAA, which is almost the exact opposite environment where it's totally hitter friendly and you're playing in Sacramento and Las Vegas with great hitters ballpark and then a bunch of other places, at 5,000 feet altitude. So it's a pretty drastic switch. And I don't think Giants fans are like fully aware of the environments there.
Well, yeah, then yeah, you go to Sacramento and you've got an 800 OPS, but a 96 WRC plus
Yeah.
while you're there because it's just a way easier environment for sure. So, couple we'll throw a couple of these and then I'll ask your opinion kind of on uh I'll ask your question or I'll ask your opinion on like a couple of the guys on the big league roster, especially some of those fighting for
Mhm.
jobs right now. It seems a few other names people have kind of thrown in there. Let's see. Hugh asked about Xander Darby. Um, had a great year in San Jose. I was super high on Xander. Then he definitely struggled in Eugene, but sometimes guys need adjustments or time.
Yeah. One of those guys, there's a big crop of them last year, older, but had success in San Jose. And okay, can you do it against competition, your own level? He'll get another shot at Eugene. I'm excited to see. I don't have too much more on him, but yeah, it's a crop of this young talent, a lot of young talent that was in San Jose and Eugene last year that I'm excited to see how they do at the next level.
For sure. All right. And then now, because we've got, and I personally am of the belief that outfield's a bigger need for the big league club, but what are your opinions between second base, outfield for the Giants? Obviously, they're way more connected to second baseman right now. I think part of that has to do with Casey's injury on his or wrist surgery. I think part of it also has to do with just what's out there and available potentially, like what's being shopped around. What are your thoughts? You can Casey, Drew, Matos, whoever on those spots for the Giants.
Yeah, so I'll start at second base. I mean, first of all, I would not, I'd be ecstatic if we traded for Nico Horner, Brendan Donovan. And it's not every day that you get a Jeff Passan tweet. You certainly do not get them unless he has some pretty serious information. So that was interesting to see. Him say that the Giants are actively shopping those two guys. With that being said, I'm confident with Casey Schmidt going into the year at second base. I put out a tweet a few days ago, and it was pretty drastic, the difference before and after he got hit by a pitch in the hand. The bat speed fell significantly. His entire offensive production just sort of, tanked. The exit velocities fell way down, and he lost his power. So as long as you're pretty confident that he'll be fully healthy next year, I think he's deserving of another shot. He was a really good hitter before he got hurt, and he's supposedly been a really good defender throughout his entire minor league career. And I think him now being solidified at second base and having, more time to get comfortable at the position, I'm comfortable with him at second base. So I'd rather they go for a right fielder. The Gilbert Matos platoon is a little bit more shaky. Neither one of them has had really any big league success. But there's not as many right field options available. I look towards Boston, where they have a pretty crowded outfield with Jarren Duran and Wilyer Abreu, and I'd love to take one of those, but the prospect package would be, pretty significant to take on that haul. But you had a great year in the organization last year with the prospects. That's why you build up a strong farm system. So if Posey were to go out and make a move, I'd love for it to be a right fielder. But like I said, I'm not going to say no to Nico Horner or Brendan Donovan.
Yeah, I and that's where I think with Casey, and when we talked to him, he's trying to drop a little weight. He was talking about trying to drop some weight and to help him with his range a little bit. I think that's the only question with him at second base. Honestly, I mean, clearly he's got the arm for anything they'll ask of him there, and really good. With the glove, it's just I think it's the range, but. I think it's got to be a Donovan or a Horner. It's got to be an actual upgrade. I know a lot of people wanted certain player, whether it was like Brandon Lowe, which I mean would have been an upgrade potentially offensively, but anybody that's watched him play defense, you'd be shaking your head at that one. Some of these other guys, like I think it's got to be an upgrade, like a clear upgrade if you're going to move off him. Otherwise, just roll with Casey there.
Yeah,
and then
I think,
right.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Worst case, like I've been a big proponent of it. Like they at least need one veteran lefty bat in right field.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted Max Kepler before he got popped for PEDs. Now the clear option seems to be Mike Tauchman, who's been in the organization before. And sure, it's not like the most pretty signing, but he's been a decent big league player and above average hitter with good defense the last 3 years. And you let him patrol right field, and that just becomes a really solid lineup. Right field with Gilbert and Matos as of now is pretty much the only hole where you say, I'm not sure we're getting big league production from there. And just adding a, sound veteran right fielder, I think would do a lot. And the other thing that it does is right now you're completely betting on Bryce Eldridge to be your starting DH. I'm the biggest Bryce Eldridge fan there is, but this kid is still like the age of a college junior. Who knows what's going to happen to him this year? And there's still some swing and miss concerns. So another bat to just give some more depth and not put all the pressure on Bryce Eldridge's plate would be nice.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as it stands right now, you're kind of looking at Gilbert getting the major bulk unless something changes, because he's pretty clearly their best defensive outfielder right now, and I think that's going to carry a lot of weight with Posey. And how they.
And it sucks because I do like Luis Matos. There's a lot to like in the profile.
Mm-hmm.
His pretty solid bat speed and a lot of power for that frame, with really good bat to ball skills. But then it's like, okay, he chases way too much and is pretty egregious in the outfield. So I wonder if maybe he has more value being shipped off as part of a trade package. But there are a lot of pieces and a lot of options who could be the solution.
Yeah. And when you were bringing up Boston, I mean, Willie or Abreu for me would be like a dream to get him over. I mean, he'd be ideal for this outfield.
Ideal.
And
if ownership is not wanting to spend money, then trading for a player still in, arbitration seems like the way to go. Obviously you'd pay the price in prospects, but you're not going to pay the price in salary. Yeah. And like I said, this is the period to win now. They've invested the money in this, in Devers and Adames and Chapman and all the other guys in Jung-Hoo Lee. And so why invest if you're not going to go all in?
Yeah.
To me, it's worth it to whatever the prospect package is, find a solution in the outfield and extend the lineup.
Yeah. Well, especially because, some of these guys, I do think eventually the price is going to come down a little bit on like what it's going to cost prospect wise. If you look around baseball, there haven't been a lot of trades. And I think that's because as of right now, there's been a couple, but right now I feel like a lot of these teams are just holding this astronomical asking price, seeing if anybody will get desperate. And nobody's really biting on it. So I do think eventually it's going to get into a somewhat reasonable range. I do think it's going to hurt depending on who it is, especially if it's somebody with multiple years of control left, like Abreu or Donovan, even to an extent, although I don't think he's necessarily worth the Giants' top 3 right now, in my opinion. But I think you could still put a pretty enticing package together, because I do think the Giants system has 4 or 5 guys that feel like are a good half season away from being top 100.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I've seen some stuff on Twitter that has frustrated me, people thinking the Giants can't put a package together. Maybe besides Tarek Skubal, the Giants, if they wanted to, can basically get any player that they wanted on the trade market. Their farm system is that impressive. And I'm certain that other organizations want some of their lower level talent. Now, is Buster Posey willing to ship it off? Who knows? Yeah. But I think, now's the time to buy and try and establish this window for success.
Yeah. I mean, you look around just in the division, it's not San Diego, I think, is going to take a little bit of a step back. Arizona finished behind the Giants last year.
Yep.
And they haven't really improved their team much. I mean, they brought Kelly back, but they haven't really done much to improve themselves.
And San Diego they lost Dylan Cease too. So now is your window to go after it. You have these players locked in to big money. I think they need to make the one last splash. Ideally for me, you finish up the offseason by trading for a bat and, ideally getting one more arm in the bullpen.
Is there any, and I'll end it on this. Is there any arms out there still, whether that's like I think Kopech is still out there, but any other, maybe it's him, maybe it's someone else, but is there any arms out there that kind of stand out for you?
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind yesterday from the Colorado Rockies, Seth Halverson was designated for assignment. He's a guy who throws 100. He has these two really good breaking balls and threw a fair amount of strikes. But the problem was he's been playing at Coors for the last few years, and breaking balls just go to die at Coors. And so I'm sure some other teams might be interested in him on the waiver market, but this is a 25-year-old pitcher who throws 100 with 2 good breaking balls and has not, had too much command issues this is a guy I'd love for the Giants to be after, a right-handed guy who has back end upside.
Yeah. Especially where San Francisco is probably one of the better places to go if you have good breaking balls.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that sounds good. All right. Well, we'll let you go. I know I don't want to keep you too late on here, so appreciate you hopping on with us tonight. Hopefully everybody here enjoyed it. We'll definitely try and get you back on here at some point in the future. I know you're a busy guy in school right now, so we'll try and bring you back on at some point. Hopefully, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you on X? I know you're on X. I don't know if you're anywhere else, but if you want to
share if you look me up, there's Matthew Knauer on Twitter. I'm there. I also probably should be more active on Substack. I have a Substack account where most of my articles go on Twitter. And then if you go on to the Daily Bruin, I'll be covering all things UCLA baseball this spring, who they're projected #1 team incoming this season in college baseball. And I have Rock Chalowski, who's the projected #1 overall pick. So, yeah, I'm going to be busy this spring covering Giants and the Bruins, but I'm excited.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you, Matthew. Hopefully everybody here enjoyed that. We'll be catching you sometime next week, I'm sure. Hopefully the Giants do something here soon. I mean, I'm getting tired of all these hypotheticals on shows. It would be really great if I had actual substance to talk about. But thanks everybody again. Go Giants, and we will catch you guys next week.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.